And then we have the famous Canon color, of course. Hi guys, my name is Matti Sulanto and I'm a photographer. And today I'm again here on the streets of Kuala Lumpur making another photo walk, and this time I have the Canon 5D with me. I already made one video with this camera or about this camera, and that was more like remembering how it was when I had this camera when it was new. I had this camera, it was my first full-frame camera, and I had this as my professional tool. Anyway, this is on loan from my good friend Robin. I'll put a link for his channel down below just in case you have never heard of him. And I decided to make one more photo walk with this camera before I return this camera to him. And now let's walk a little bit, and while I'm walking I'm also talking about this camera. This is a DSLR, of course, and it has optical viewfinder, and that viewfinder is, now that I'm used to mirrorless cameras, the optical viewfinder is kind of good and bad, a little bit frustrating at times. First of all, if you have a mirrorless camera, you can't see through the viewfinder if you have power off. And a couple of times I've tried to take pictures, but camera does nothing, and I'm wondering what is wrong, but it turns out I have the camera powered off. But because I was, able to see through the viewfinder, I thought, of course I can take a picture. But with a DSLR you can do that, but you can't do that with a mirrorless. But this happens when you get used to certain things and you start to take them for granted. The other thing with the viewfinder is that I can't see my exposures in real time like I can see with a mirrorless camera. And most of the time it's not a problem. Canon automatic exposure does a really good job. But sometimes I'd like to see my exposures real time. That is also because I'm so used to mirrorless cameras right now, and I'm used to seeing my exposures in real time. Back in the day when I was using this camera as a professional tool, it was normal to look through a optical viewfinder and meter your shots properly and use exposure compensation whenever you needed it, and you learn to know the situations where you needed to compensate for the camera's metering. But all those things, I have forgotten many of those things already, and I'm kind of spoiled by these modern mirrorless cameras. They are really easy to use, and it's almost impossible to ruin your pictures with a modern mirrorless camera. But with this camera it is possible, kind of, because you can't preview your shot through the viewfinder. Autofocus on this camera is quite reliable, but there were some problems with these DSLRs when we started to see more and more megapixels. I remember when I got my Nikon D800, and that was the first camera to have 36 megapixels, if I remember correctly, and my cameras had terrible focus errors because on a DSLR the focus element and the imaging sensor are two different things, and if there is some sort of even minor misalignment between those two things, elements in the camera, then you will get focus errors. And later also these DSLRs started to have some sort of focus fine-tuning or whatever it was called, I don't remember, but you basically, if you wanted to make sure your focus is right, 100% right with every lens, you had to fine-tune your camera with every lens, and that was quite tedious and time-consuming task. You could not see the focus errors on a camera like this because it only has about 13 megapixels, but when you had a camera with 36 megapixels or even more, it was so easy to see even minor focusing errors. But with this camera, focusing is not a big problem. another thing with an old camera like this is that all the focusing points are right in the middle of the frame, and there is no face detect or face recognition or anything like that, so you have to manually move your focus point. But even if you move it, the area where you can move it is very, very small. But nonetheless, you can still make great shots with this, and I have nothing major complaints regarding the autofocus itself. It is just a little bit rudimentary compared to modern cameras. The menu is incredibly simple on this camera. There's basically only one page that you scroll up and down. No separate tabs or many pages or anything. And it's so refreshing to see a menu like this on a camera, because modern cameras have such a long and convoluted menus, and it's sometimes really, really difficult to find whatever it is that you're looking for. But with this camera, it's so easy, and you just scroll up and down that one page and you can very easily find every item on the menu, and even if you have to scroll through the whole menu, you can still fairly quickly find whatever it is that you're looking for, even if you don't know where it is exactly in the menu. And then we have the famous Canon color, of course. I'm not usually a big time color science proponent. I get the colors I want from every camera, but there's no denying the fact that Canon has really, really nice colors straight out of camera. Canon has always known how to make good colors or good color science, and I really like the output from this camera. Even today. I liked it already back in the day when I was using these as my professional tools, but I like it even today, and the colors look really, really good straight out of camera. And I'm a RAW shooter, of course, but those great colors still help me in post, because I need very little fine-tuning or tweaking for my pictures, and they look great. The shutter button has really long and deep travel, and I feel I have to be really determined to get the shot when I hit the shutter, because I really have to push the button really hard to activate the shutter. Compared to my Sony, the button feels kind of stiff, and sometimes when I'm taking pictures, I'm afraid that I'm going to kind of shake the camera at the same time I'm pressing the shutter, because it feels so long, the travel, and it takes a little bit to get used to that. As it happens, I'm not walking alone today. I'm walking with my friend Robin, who actually owns this camera. And now let's ask Robin a few questions about this Canon 5D and lots of noise and DSLRs in general. Let me hand the camera to him and also the microphone.
Hello, Matti. I am not collecting these cameras actually. I only have two full-frame cameras now. The Canon 5D and a Nikon D600. The Nikon D600 because it's much newer, and that camera was banned in China. So for this particular camera, well, actually, I first encountered this many years ago during my university days. I saw one photograph. I really liked that photograph. I looked at the EXIF data, and it was taken with a Canon 5D full frame with a 50 f1.2 prime lens. It was a portrait with very nice bokeh. And I thought, wow, if I need that kind of result, I will need a full frame camera and a prime lens. So they got stuck in my head for many years. I couldn't afford a full frame camera back then. The camera was quite pricey, but now, many years later, the price has come down and I can afford the camera. So I got this to relive a nostalgia that I never had.
The battery life is excellent compared to any modern camera, and these DSLRs had a good reputation when it comes to battery life. And I remember back in the day I could easily take a weekend-long trip, for example, and I never needed a charger or even a backup battery because I could easily take, 1,500, 2,000 shots on one single charge. And that is one thing that I sometimes miss with modern cameras. But of course, any modern mirrorless camera is good enough for one day's shooting usually. And after one day, you can usually charge your battery. So in most scenarios, it's not any kind of a big real world problem. This is all I have for you today. Thank you so much for walking with me. I hope you enjoyed this little walk with me and the Canon 5D. And if you enjoyed this a lot, please do consider buying me a cup of coffee. There's a link down below for that if you don't live in Finland. Thanks so much, and I'll definitely see you in the next video.